Welcome guys to another video in the HTTP and JSON blueprint utility series. I decided to come back to this series because the old videos are quite outdated, some as old as 10 months, and there has been many more new features and updates to the plugin since then, especially in the HTTP area. So I just wanted to go over all of the new systems and features that you could find in the plugin now, some simple tutorials and examples of how to use those systems and the capabilities of this plugin. What you guys can see now on screen is my Fab store, where you can actually get the plugins, and alternatively you can also get them on my Gumroad market, which is actually a little bit cheaper. So depending where you guys want to get your plugins from, there are two different options. But as a disclaimer, the HTTP and JSON blueprint utility or the HTTP Pro plugin will be required to follow this tutorial. But without further ado, let's get into the video. Before we get started, I'm going to create a new project for myself, and in this video and any new videos coming, I'm going to be using Unreal 5.5 because at the time of recording this is the latest version. So if anyone wants to follow along, also you can create yourself a fresh project or just use whatever project you have currently on hand, but I'm just gonna create a fresh one. So I'm gonna let this load and then I'll get back to you guys in a minute. Okay, as you guys can see, I am in the new project. This is a fresh third-person template project, so yeah, as you guys can see, it's all good. Before we get started doing any actual logic or anything like that, we have to enable the plugin. So here I'll show you which plugin I'm enabling. So I'm going to edit plugins, and then under installed, assuming you've already installed the plugin to your engine, it's going to be under Unreal Center. And as you guys can see, I have all the plugins, but for this video and for the rest of the videos, I am going to be using the HTTP and JSON blueprint utility. But any HTTP logic from here will also apply to this one, and any JSON logic will apply to this one and this one. Okay, so yeah, it's going to cover all of them. All right, so I'm going to enable this plugin and restart now, and I'm going to enable the plugin and then take us right back. All right, and now I am back in the project, as you guys can see, and I've actually gone ahead and done some off-screen work, which included first finding an API I'm going to showcase in this video. And the API I have found, which I'm going to use, is this one right here. What it does is it's a database API which will provide me with a load of different games which are all 100% free to play, and with data which might be useful to anyone trying to create an application which might give you a list of free-to-play games, or you don't know what game to play and you just want to have a look what there is. This database just has them all. So here's the API which I'm going to be using, and this is the endpoint. And also there is much more customization to this API. If you guys can see here, you can choose if it's a shooter, PC game, to sort by alphabetical order. There's much more things this API can do, so I'm gonna link this API in the description below, but for the sake of this video, I'm only gonna use this GET request right here. Okay, so with the GET request copied and it's now in my clipboard, I'm gonna go back into Engine and I'm gonna test it out. So first things what I'm gonna do is find the actual character blueprint. So it's right here, open it up. And this is just the default third-person template blueprint, so I have changed no logic here. Now let's actually test the endpoint. So let's zoom in and create a new begin play node. And just right off that, we're gonna create a HTTP request node. So right there, we have the node. This node has gone through many iterations since the beginning of the plugin till now, and fundamentally it looks exactly the same, but the underlying logic which runs the code has been reworked 100%, and it's much more stable now, less prone to bugs, and also much more efficient. But it's still used the same as I've used it in the old videos. So what this node requires is a URL which will point to the actual API you want to call. So in this case, that's the GET request we saw on the website. So I'm just going to paste it in. Then the request type. So only in this video I'm going to be using the GET request, but I am going to cover the post request in a later video. So for now it's going to be of type GET. Then timeout. So what timeout does is, this is how long the request is going to try to send itself. before it determines, okay, it failed, I'm going to cancel myself and stop sending it. This is important in situations where, let's say, you sent a request and the server is taking a long time to respond. If the server doesn't respond within, let's say, 60 seconds, you just want to drop the request. You don't want this request to linger in the background. So I always recommend to put something in here. I like to just put as 60 seconds because this is in seconds. So this will take a minute. If a request does not return within a minute, it will drop. So just like that. And now what I'm going to do is, as you guys can see, there is an on success, on progress, on failed. So pulling off from on success, I'm going to create a new node called JSON to string. What this node will do is take any JSON object you create within Unreal and convert it directly into a usable string variable. This is very useful if for some reason you want to use strings, or in debugging purposes like HTTP requests. I want to see what kind of data this HTTP request will return. So out of out.json, I'm going to plug that in into convert JSON to string, and then just print that to screen. So this way I will be able to see, one, if the request returned success, what kind of data it returned, and print it to screen. In case it fails, I'm also going to print a string which just says failed. All right, so here's the logic. I'll save it, compile it, and now if I go back into the game and just press play, there you go. Oh, very laggy, because I'm assuming the data returned, there is a lot of data, so it lagged for a second. But as you guys can see, it worked. So if I close it now and just go into the output log, there you go. As you guys can see, all of the JSON data is here with all of the games we potentially could use. Here we can actually see what type of data the HTTP request returns. So it's an ID, a title, thumbnail, a description, and etc. So using this returned HTTP data, we can now create some sort of application or a widget which will display this information to the user. So in my case, for this video, I'm going to actually display the thumbnail, the title, the thumbnail, the description, the actual URL to the website of the game, the genre, and the platform. So that's the data I am going to use. So before we continue, I'm just going to actually select all of this, just copy it and save it somewhere so I can reference this back later. If any of you guys are doing something similar to me and following along, I would recommend saving this so you can reference it later if needed. So I'm just going to save it in a notepad. Okay, so after I found out what kind of data the HTTP request returns, I actually went off screen and created myself two widgets which will populate when the HTTP request returns, and it will display all of the data to the user, which to me. So I'll just showcase the widgets I created. So the first widget is just a main widget that gets created. It's going to display the title, the genre, and the platform, as you guys can see. Here is how the structure of the widget actually is laid out. So if you guys want to follow it along, you can. So then below here is actually a scroll box, which is going to get populated dynamically when the request comes back with all of the data. And for the actual graph of this widget, we only have a custom event which is called populate scroll box, which is going to take the actual JSON data that is returned from the HTTP request. So we'll get back to it soon. And the second widget I created is called a widget entry. What this widget entry is going to be doing is actually displaying all of the data which has been returned for each game from the HTTP request. So as you guys can see, it's going to display the title, the genre, the platform, the actual image, and then there's an invisible button here, which when pressed will actually take me to the website of that game. So this is how it's structured, this widget. Each text widget you guys can see here is actually marked as a variable. So it's actually accessible in the graph of this widget. Same as the image. So the image is also a variable. And then also the button, as you guys can see, it's just invisible. And the graph of this widget is actually looking like this. So what this does is actually, as soon as this widget is created, it's going to take the passed in data and populate the display texts with that passed in data. And the data we're passing in here, these strings are actually created here. And each string, as you guys can see, is actually instance editable and exposed on spawn. So when this widget is created, we are going to have the option to pass in data. And this is the data we're going to pass in. You might notice that there is references to thumbnail display and thumbnail string, but there is nothing to do with thumbnail logic here. That's because we're going to get back to this later. For now, I just left it empty. Okay, and below we have a event which is called when the button, which this invisible button, is released. So meaning the player pressed it and then released it, launch a new URL or a new website. And the link to the website is again passed in from the request. So yeah, this is the logic which I have created. If you guys want to create it yourself, here it is. Okay, let's now get into the actual logic we want to create. So we have this HTTP request and it returns the data. We know what kind of data it returns, and we have prepared the widgets for this type of data. So now we're going to remove the old code and we're going to pull out from out.json and use the node try get JSON array and just detach it from here and just run it on success like that. As this HTTP request node is asynchronous, we know this by this little clock here. As soon as the execution flow finishes here, it's going to run out this side. So it's going to run event begin play, send the request, and immediately go here. It will not actually wait for the response. If you want to wait for the response and only run logic when the response has returned, you have to use these output pins here. So on success, we're going to get out JSON, and the field name we're going to look for is data. So what this function does is it goes through the JSON object, looks for any array that is called data. If found, it's going to provide me each JSON object within that JSON data. Okay, so now we have the actual data here. If I just do a branch, and actually I don't even need to connect success. I just want to see if this is working. So I'm going to connect a branch, breakpoint this like that, compile, save, and just start the game. And the breakpoint has been hit right away, as you guys can see. So I can now check if this is working. If I just hover my mouse over this array, I can see it was populated with 403 entries. So now I know that this JSON request is returning 403 free-to-play games for me to use. And then here I can open it up and see all of the data. Okay, so that's cool. So I can stop the execution, delete the branch. And now I can move on to actually creating the widget. So let's create a new widget, create widget. And the widget I want to create is the actual main widget here, which I showed you guys before. So class is going to be main widget, like that. I am going to add this to viewport. And also I'm actually going to make sure that the input for the player is only for the UI. So I'm going to get player controller, set input mode to UI only. What this is going to do is it's going to make sure that your movement, your mouse movement and your keyboard inputs will not affect the actual game, but only the widget itself. This will work. You can provide a widget to focus. You don't have to, but I'll just provide the widget we just created like that. And one more thing I'm going to do is actually display the mouse. Because right now, as soon as the game starts, the mouse will disappear. I want to see the mouse, so I'm going to do show mouse, set show mouse cursor. And now you're actually going to be able to see your mouse cursor when the widget is created. Okay, so let's test if this is working. I'll compile and save and just press play. And there you go. As you guys can see, the game disappeared. It is in the background, but you just can't see it. The main widget appeared. It is not populated with anything at the moment. And I can see my mouse and I'm trying to move the camera, but nothing's happening. So yeah, that's fine. Let's close this down. And now let's actually populate the widget with the data. So as you guys can remember before, in the main widget, I've had this event, populate scrollbox. So from the main character, from third person character, I'm going to drag out from main widget and call that event. So populate scrollbox, like that. Just drag it over here and just connect it. Like that. And this event is expecting an array of JSON data. We actually have this data right here. So let's just connect these together. And now what's happening is as soon as the request returns, and it's a successful return, it's going to take this data, create the main widget for us, and then populate that main widget with this returned data. So now we can actually go to the main widget, and now we can implement this logic. We now send the data over. We now have to extract that data from the array and populate the widget. To do this, we're gonna run a for each loop from JSON data like that. And then we are going to access all of the data we need. If you remember earlier in the video, I said to take note of the data you want to access because we're going to be using it later. So this is the way we're actually going to be using it. So I actually wrote it down right here. So this is the data the request returns, but I'm only going to be using the title, thumbnail, description, URL, genre, and platform. This is the data I'm going to use. So for each loop, for each element in the loop, we're going to try and get a string field because we know all of those are string fields. So this will just return data attached to a field. So the first field we're going to access is the title, and that's going to return me the title of the game. I'm going to promote it to a variable just so it's easier to access. I'm just going to rename it title. And I'm going to do this for every single type of data I want to access. Okay, so now you guys can see I have gone ahead and accessed each type of data I want to access. So title, thumbnail, description, URL, genre, and platform. I have saved each string to a variable so it's easier for me to access. And now what I can do is at the very end, I can create a new widget, create widget. And this time I'm going to be creating the widget entry. And as you guys can see, as soon as I created this widget entry, it has created these variables here, which are actually exposed variables from widget entry. And these will be actually used to populate the widget itself. So now with the widgets I have cached here, I'm going to just drag them out. And now what I'm going to do is connect each one of these saved variables to the correct exposed variable. There you go. So the widget was created, it was populated with the correct data. And one more step before we can move on is actually we need to save this widget or display it, because right now it's created, but it's not actually displayed. So I'm going to take the scroll box and I'm going to add a new child to that scroll box. And that child is going to actually be this widget entry. So now what's going to happen is for each found JSON object, we're going to take all of its data. We're going to create a new widget entry and populate that entry with the found data. And then we're going to add that entry into the scroll box. Okay. So assuming everything went fine, if I compile this, save and enter the game, I should see this. There you go. So we have the titles of each game here, the type, the genre of the game, and the platform. And if I just find one, Overwatch 2, hover my mouse over this, I am going to see a little description of this said game. But as you guys can see, there is a little mismatch. I don't think this is the icon of Overwatch 2, unless there was an update I didn't pay attention to. But yeah, this is not it. So let's go and quickly fix this. So inside of widget entry, we have this image here. As you guys can see, this is just a default image I have set when there is no image selected. But let's actually update this dynamically for each game we receive. So what we have to do is actually look for the passed in data, and we're going to look for thumbnail. Thumbnail is actually a string, and the reason it's a string is because that URL doesn't return an image. It returns a link to the image. A link to an image isn't really useful for us, so what we have to do is actually download that image. So in this video, I'm going to quickly use a different node, which this plugin also provides, but there's going to be a different video explaining what this node does, which is download file. And then we're going to plug in the thumbnail link to the URL. So this will download that file for us, and then let's just provide it a timeout. And as soon as this is finished, for the downloaded binary data, we're going to convert that to an image. So binary to texture 2D, like that. All of these nodes can be found in the plugin. And as soon as this is a success, we're going to take the display thumbnail and we're going to set the brush from texture. So that's actually going to update the image for us. And we're just going to provide the texture we want to set, like that. So now we have created a very simple texture streaming system where it's going to provide us with the URL of the image. We're going to download that image dynamically, convert the binary to a texture, and display the image. Okay, so compile and save. And now if we play the game, we should see that after a few seconds, all of the images has been updated with the correct image of the game. So Throne and Liberty here, this is one of the games I play. If I press on this anywhere within this region, the website will appear, as you guys can see. And if I wanted to, I could watch the trailer and sign up and start playing right away. So that's actually going to be the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed and learned something new. If you like the stuff you see in this video, or you like the plugin, a link to this plugin will be in the description below also. I'm really new to creating videos, so if this format is too long, or if I skipped anything, or if you guys would like me to go through more details, please do let me know and I'll try to make the next videos a bit better. But till then, hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you want to see more, please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.